What's up, guys? Real quickly before I jump into the video, huge week coming up here with the Modern Warfare reveal, which I can excitedly say I'll have footage here on the channel here for you guys. So before I get into it, be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already for the big week up on deck here. We're gonna have an absolutely absurd amount of content you guys won't want to miss. Plus, also follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, linked in the description below, to keep up to date with not only the discussion, but also the posts and pics from the reveal event. Excited to share it all and take you guys along for the ride, but now back to the regularly scheduled content. Every so often, stories come up about developments of games and some things that the general public would have absolutely no idea about, but they're kind of fascinating when you think about it. Learning a little bit of the insight into the back end and the work that went into the game that you play on a daily basis. And as of recently, there's been a similar situation that came out for Black Ops 4 that gave us potentially some insight into the version of Black Ops 4 the world never got to see and may never, ever get to see. Today, I want to talk about that and the potential for this variation to have been very different and cause some drastic change-ups to not only just Black Ops 4 that we know today, but also potentially Call of Duty. So, that said, this information coming from the Twitter user NotHeatX or NotHeatX. To my knowledge, a lot of his stuff in the past has checked out before, and some of the stuff referenced has actually checked out from other stuff that I've heard elsewhere as well. So, I like to think there's some validity to this, but as with all things talking about development this early on and with so little actually out there known, take it all with a grain of salt. But I found it fascinating and wanted to share it with you guys and wanted to talk about it. So, the biggest thing here with this is that Black Ops 4, let's start out on the very broad term spectrum here. It was actually planned to be a sequel to Black Ops 3, not a prequel like we see with Black Ops 4. Currently, Black Ops 4 takes place a handful of years before Black Ops 3, and then we lead up to the events that we saw in Black Ops 3. But according to reports, it was supposedly going to be set afterwards and even more post-apocalyptic in that sense, but it was meant to expand upon the enjoyment of Black Ops 3. I don't know about you guys, I don't think that I can maybe speak for the majority of players, but I personally had a ton of fun, and a lot of the people that I associated with ended up loving Black Ops 3 tremendously. Probably the most, so much so, out of the three main advanced movement titles. Advanced Warfare and Infinite Warfare were fun in their own right, but it was something that Black Ops 3 just really stood out and had this grind factor that I wanted to play every single day for the first time since like Black Ops 2. But it was meant to play off of that enjoyment. They wanted to capitalize on that and just extend it further. But in doing so, they wanted to shake up the core gameplay a little bit. They wanted to test a few things out, and initially, kill streaks and score streaks actually weren't in the game, apparently. From what this says, it was a bigger focus on the objective instead of having to worry about dying off a streak. And having played a ton of Call of Duty and a lot of solo queuing, I feel like that probably could help out some teammates that may be a little reluctant to go into the objective and jump on a flag or something like that. This then showcased the true intentions, though, of the Fog of War, a brand new thing that we did see in the final build of the game, but with no UAVs in the build that were callable as a score streak for 500 score, Fog of War was meant to relieve that a little bit, to be a much more team-based aspect of the game, where you could either see that dot pop up or a teammate could call out much easier. Apparently, it was much larger than the current build that we have right now, and allowed for spotting to be easier, while again, not terribly detracting from the fact that there were no UAVs sweeping in the regular game. So it definitely would have shaken up the core meta of just map awareness, but also would have then tried to stress a little bit more team building here in regular games. Another thing that was really curious to hear about that apparently was going to be in that build but was then since cut was actually jetpacks. Apparently, according to this, initially it was meant to be a gear item in the gear slot, but was removed entirely soon after the initial development, because it apparently took away from the fluidity of the regular game. But it was initially in there as a side option for those who enjoyed Black Ops 3. If you liked it, you could use it. If not, you weren't missing out too much. Though, that definitely would be weird for me to see, because not everyone would be on the same playing ground, almost quite literally. This would be something you'd have to take it in place of a stim shot or something like an acoustic sensor, but I'm wondering what the cooldown would have been like if it would have been similar to, say, something like combat axes or manual health regeneration, because if it was something on the slower end, like a combat axe, it wouldn't be too bad, because you'd only see maybe like once a minute somebody using their jetpack or their thruster, as opposed to every 3 seconds like you did in Black Ops 3. But if that were to persist, I'd be really curious to see what the skill gap or level playing ground would be like if it was such a limited time use thing. And I'm wondering if it would even be used all that much, because you'd have to battle for things like a stim shot or acoustic sensor or anything else in that equipment. It would be something that wouldn't necessarily be as relevant, maybe. I know that personally I'd rather regen my health twice as fast and more often than using a jetpack every minute or so. So in that case, stim shot would definitely be the more crutch equipment over a jetpack, but definitely curious to hear that part. Apparently, create a class was drastically different as well, and Pick 10 wasn't something that was introduced until late in development, presumably right before that reveal date. But originally, apparently, it was planned to be like World War II, but without the division system in place, with a set primary and secondary slots with up to 6 attachments and the operator mods taking 2 slots each, thus allowing for a little bit more customization than we see now with Pick 10, and allowing you to custom tailor some more basic framework around how you wanted to play. Apparently, also, Molotovs and frags weren't initially in the game, but were added into development to make it feel more like Call of Duty. It was initially intended just to be more dependent on your specialist equipment and what was chosen there. And speaking of specialists, this is where I think it gets really interesting. Apparently, they used to have ultimates. Now, I joke about how Crash's TAC 5 and other things like that for other specialists are the ultimate just because it's an easy term to use for the higher value item. But actual ultimates, according to this, were actually initially planned, taking the hero-based system from Black Ops 3 and amplifying it even further than what we see in the current game. But ultimates were going to have a much longer cooldown. I'd be curious to see how long it would be, given that some aspects of the specialist right now take longer for players to earn naturally as is, especially if they are a more casual player. But it was apparently supposed to be something that made the UI look a little nicer too, where the UI and the HUD initially was meant to have your healing linked to your health bar status on the left, and your equipment, weaponry, and ultimate of your specialist were all in the middle, where you see everything now, making it a more centralized and more focused simply on the specialist items in the middle of the screen rather than your health or your equipment or whatever you have on top of that. Now, along with this, we also got a little bit of intel on what some of the ultimates would look like per specialist, and those given, for example, would be Recon using a UAV as an ultimate, Torque's ultimate being a sentry gun, Prophet's being a mantis, Ruin's being an airstrike, and so on and so forth. They'd be more tied in with the specialist abilities and themes, giving them more of a purpose in game and also making each role a crucial role per player. And I mean, think of it this way. I think a great example right now of picking your specialist wisely and having a player that understands the role wisely is that of, say, Seraph right now. You have to choose somebody that, for the love of everything, won't put the tac deploy in your own spawn whenever you're using it. Instead, you want it somewhere like mid-map or by a point you're trying to capture, or somewhere you can apply pressure in-game with that map flow. But when it comes down to simple things like a UAV and a radar sweep being tethered to an ultimate, that would have given so much more weight to individual roles and characters like Recon, making each selection seriously crucial and making that air quote main of a specialist something that you'd probably see a lot more of, where players are more so comfortable with one role rather than another. I know that in Black Ops 4 in particular right now, there are a few specialists that I play absolutely all the time, but I could jump in and out of any single one because there's really not all that much crucial difference with them. But this would have added another layer of mastery that really would have helped dictate how the game would play on a multiplayer sense. Apparently, for the modes and the storyline, there was actually something pretty cool here supposed to happen with this, where Black Ops 4 was meant to have a war type mode like how World War II did, and personally I would have been all for that. But apparently it was in the same fashion, with unique larger maps set simply for war, not playable in any other mode within MP, but instead was just for that war mode. Whether or not it would be called that, who knows? But apparently one map was described as an attempt to collect power cells for a robot, while the other faction is pushing back, trying to not let you capture those. As for the campaign, this was something that was cool to hear a little bit more about because we know it obviously got cut. We heard the rumors that it was a 2v2 campaign, and this extended a little bit more on that. Initially, according to this, it was meant to be a co-op and back and forth mentality, which I don't think that we ever really fully discussed on the channel outside of the rumors that recently came up, but it was immensely cool as you'd see a struggle back and forth between conflicting factions played in real time, and it would dictate the outcome of the game. So perhaps one mission you and your friend are trying to protect a VIP, while on the same end and the same time, another team would be playing against you head to head, and they're tasked with taking out said VIP. And without an insane breakdown further, that's kind of the basis of where campaign would have gone, apparently, according to this and other rumors out there, which is honestly, I think, really cool. But after 2v2 was scrapped, solo missions for Specialists apparently were developed, which partially warped then into Specialist HQ, it seems, though Specialist HQ versions are now insanely dumbed down versions of this because it's kind of like you just play matches against bots, but each had unique levels like a mini campaign with dialogue and cutscenes alike. This guy gave a little bit of an insight into it in which he said Ruin and Battery first were exploring a large destroyed city, using mobility and cover to their advantage, and after Battery saves her VIP, who happens to be Torque, they both escape to a nearby gas station but must use sentries and barricades to defend themselves against the waves of enemies. And after being ambushed and surrounded in a jungle, Nomad must use his expert traps to escape alive, and careful placement of equipment and awareness of the surrounding terrain would have played a big role in the mission. Apparently also, Ajax kinda does what we see in his cutscene where he has to deal with a riot situation in the streets. But that's what was described of Black Ops 4 in the very, very, very early builds of it and what was initially being pitched. And truthfully, I think that's tremendously different, but not necessarily bad. I think immediately it would have been labeled as not Call of Duty at that point without things like kill streaks, with things like jetpacks versus regular boots on the ground stuff, with a 2v2 campaign. That would have been really interesting to see how that one worked out with ultimates and everything that came along with that. But at the same time, I don't know if it's just me or not, but I think that I don't know if I'd prefer it, but I'd love to actually play a build of that. It sounds super interesting just to see that difference, you know? Not necessarily I would take this over what we have for the core functionality. Obviously, we're talking about no MTX here. I do enjoy the core gameplay of Black Ops 4. I don't know if I would enjoy it as much as the core that we have now, but it's definitely really fascinating to me to hear about what never was. It's also important to note, though, that a ton of stuff like this is standard for all development, not just Call of Duty, where you throw stuff at a wall and you see what sticks and what plays well, what flows well, and what is just really cool. It's a strange level of balance trying to give fans a familiar feel, especially with a game like Call of Duty, and also innovate to make something new. And I think some of these may have pushed a little too far ambitiously one way, which may have angered some hardcore fans. But at the same time, it's definitely really cool, if this is all 100% legit, to hear about this kind of stuff and what could have been. But anyways, that's where we're going to wrap it up. I just wanted to share this information here with you because I thought it was fascinating. I seriously love taking a look at deep dives and stuff like this that otherwise we'd never see this information. It's literally one of the coolest things to me. So I wanted to share it with you guys. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Is this something that you would be interested in playing for yourself? Do you think it would have been better, worse than the current fundamental build of Black Ops 4? Again, I know the big gripe that I have all the time is MTX, but the fundamentals of Black Ops 4 and the core gameplay, better or worse, what does it sound like? Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you drop a like down below. And of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Black Ops 4, MP, Blackout, Zombies. We got you covered the best of updates, news, information, tips, tricks, all that good stuff. So if any of that interests you, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. If you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to get connected outside of YouTube. Probably live on both those. So if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. But all that out of the way, thank you guys all so much for watching. Mine's been Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.